90s. Oh, 90s. As far as gender neutral went, you did not succeed. I really can't blame the 90s. I mean, the 80s and 70s did this as well. But when we look at kids' shows, particularly in the 90s, it was a sausage fest. If it was gender neutral, it had all boy characters except for maybe one or two girls shafted in there, or else as the villain or stupid love interest or whatever. The Nostalgia Chick does a whole video about the Smurfette Principle, so I'm not going to go into it in this video. But I think we can all agree that when looking back at the 90s, there's one gender-neutral kids show that has strong female characters and a strong homosexual-friendly plotline. You can't think of what I'm talking about, can you? Give you a second. Still can't think of it? Alright, I'll help you out. Yes, Sailor Moon. Whether you like the show or hate it, it's hard not to admire the show, because it does strive for a more feminist-friendly and homosexual-friendly plot. A quick overview for those of you who have never seen the show. It revolves around a 14-year-old girl named Asagi who finds out that she's a Sailor Senshi named Sailor Moon, as well as the reincarnation of the Moon Princess Serenity. She, along with the 8 other Sailor Senshis and Tuxedo Mask, her boyfriend, need to defend the Earth from invaders. Each season has its own villain and problems that Sailor Moon has to overcome. The dub likes to say she overcomes them with the power of love, but really it's more like an ancient magical MacGuffin crystal. And straight up violence. I'm sure love's in there somewhere, but it's mostly MacGuffin and violence. Anyways, Usagi often struggles with having to deal with the responsibilities of being a powerful superhero, as well as taking on the responsibilities of being princess and future queen, when really she just wants to stay a teenager. And in fairness, she's 14. You'd just want to stay a teenager too. The plot itself is interesting, even if the animation is bad at times and the episodes are really repetitive. Really repetitive. It's not the best anime ever, but as an early attempt, it was far from bad. But like I said before, it really strives when it comes to making strong female and gay characters. It's ahead of its time with actually succeeding. This video I'm mainly going to speak about the feminist aspects of the show. My second video talking about the homosexual aspects will come up next week, and I'll have a link in the description. Anyways, it's obvious for anyone who's even seen the American version that they do try to make these characters admirable. Okay, the dub changes a lot of things. It's more or less generic and a bit less gender neutral. It cuts out a lot of the violence, turning Usagi, whose dub name is Serena, into a total bitch. But it doesn't totally slaughter the empowering female lead storyline. And, you know, even though it slaughters quite a few other aspects of the show, it does achieve a feminist goal in America. Just barely, because Serena is really annoying, but it does. Okay, so Sailor Moon was one of the first magical girl shows to really be big on its own merits, particularly in the States. And it's the only show I remember growing up that was marketed as gender neutral that had an almost all-female cast. Okay, so again, in America it was targeted more towards girls, but a lot of boys watched it too. And to this day, I think Sailor Moon is the only female-oriented action show where the characters actually legitimately act like 14-year-old girls. Whether or not you think the characters are annoying, and trust me, they are, they don't fall into the tropes that many token girls fall into. They're still in a learning curve. They're still kids. Their personality is their own, and all of them have different personalities. Sometimes they're scared. Sometimes they don't want to fight. But in the end, they keep moving forward. They don't do it to prove they're better than guys. They don't automatically become badass when they transform. They just see what needs to be done and do it. I think that's important. And the fact that they're all girls is completely coincidence. It doesn't impact their characters. Their faults or their strengths are their faults and their strengths because that's how they were born. Gender has nothing to do with it. It just happens to be that they're all girls, and they don't make a big deal out of it. In fact, they never once really strive this girl power thing. It's just the fact that they happen to be girls and they happen to kick ass. Even as when Asagi's in her princess and queen form, she still kicks ass. Despite the fact that a lot of people say it's cliche to have her as a princess, and okay, it kind of is, but the thing is, Serenity is incredibly powerful, and not written as your typical damsel in distress princess. She kicks ass! In fact, Sailor Moon changes into a princess form when she needs more power. Plus, her mom, the queen, was the queen of the entire solar system. How fucking empowering is that? Not only does a woman rule the entire solar system, but she does it, presumably, all on her own, because her husband is never shown or alluded to. Even in the future, when Usagi and Mamoru become king and queen of Earth, Usagi is the much more powerful one as well as the one in charge. Mamoru seems to be just there for support, which typically is the female role. But again, it's not a big deal. He doesn't care that even though he's the king, she's the one in charge. It's not a big deal because he loves her and he accepts her rule, and that's just how it's supposed to be. I'm not saying this show isn't without its criticisms from feminists. I've heard a lot of people complain about the Senshi's uniforms objectifying the characters, but I don't think that's true. Yes, the Senshis wear short skirts and tight tops, but keep in mind, in Japan, nudity isn't as big of a taboo as it is here, and in ancient Japan, many workers had shorter clothes because if they worked in the fields, they needed their legs free. It wasn't like here where if you showed your ankles, you were a whore. If they needed their legs free, they had short kimonos. So, as sexy as the Sailor Senshi suits may be, say that 10 times fast, they are practical for fighting. Well, most of them are practical for fighting. There's a one-piece leotard so they can run and jump easily, and having such a short fuka means that it doesn't have unnecessary fabrics getting in their way. Yes, the heels are a bit, you know, less practical, but still, if they can fight in them, it's perfectly fine, and I don't find it very objectifying at all. Just happen to be sexy. Gets the job done. I've also heard people take issue with the fact that Tuxedo Mask rescues Sailor Moon a lot, but I don't know. While he does rescue her sometimes, it's mainly just to tell her to stop whining and do it herself, and his timely arrivals are no more or less frequent than the other Senshis. In fact, a lot of times she's the one saving him. And while Asagi does cry over Mamoru sometimes, it's typically because he's been fucking kidnapped, brainwashed, or on the verge of dying. Times anyone would cry, male or female. And when they break up in Season R, Mamoru is seen agonizing over Asagi too. Even though Asagi is agonizing over Mamoru, it shows that it's not just a female trait. Yes, girls can mope over breakups, but boys can too. And I think that's a big thing that not a lot of shows like to point out, that guys are sometimes just as fragile. Also, another thing, Tuxedo Mask, even though technically being Sailor Earth, has the least amount of powers. So, you can't really argue about him saving her when he really has no power at all in the anime. He has a bit more in the manga, but still, he is by far the least powerful. So no matter what flaws Sailor Moon may have, and in fairness, there are a lot of them, particularly in the dub, it takes steps in the right direction by having strong female characters in children's media. And we can probably thank it for the development of strong female characters to follow, particularly in animes. Think about that for this week. Tune back in next week when we talk about homosexuality in Sailor Moon. In the name of the moon, peace out, bro.